First contact protocol. The transport pod broke through Earth's atmosphere at exactly 0347 hours. Its adaptive camouflage making it invisible to human detection systems. Crickstall felt the familiar weight of anticipation in his thorax as the craft descended toward the coordinates his superiors had selected. 3 years of preparation had led to this moment. 3 years of studying human language, culture, and behavior patterns from intercepted broadcasts and stolen data. The Vorthak Empire had been watching Earth for over 2 centuries, cataloging this young species as they stumbled through their primitive technological development. Humans appeared to be exactly what they seemed, an unremarkable race that had barely achieved interstellar awareness. Their weapons were crude, their technology basic, and their understanding of the universe laughably limited. Yet something had changed in recent decades. Strange reports had been filtering back to the Vorthak homeworld. Whispers of humans displaying capabilities that shouldn't exist. That's why Crickstall was here. As one of the Empire's most skilled infiltrators, he had been chosen to spend 6 months living among humans, studying them from within their society and determining whether these anomalous reports had any basis in reality. His biosynthetic disguise was perfect, grown from human genetic samples and overlaid onto his natural exoskeleton. To any observer, he would appear to be a perfectly normal human in his 30s. The pod touched down in a remote forest, clearing 50 miles from Chicago. Crickstall emerged, his movements careful and measured as he adjusted to the sensation of walking in human form. The gravity felt strange compared to his homeworld, lighter but somehow more unstable. He buried the transport pod beneath a meter of earth and activated its beacon suppressor. For the next 6 months, he would be completely cut off from Vorthak civilization. Dr. Marcus Reed was born in that forest clearing. Crickstall had spent months crafting this identity, complete with educational records, work history, and social connections. Marcus was a visiting researcher from England, specializing in cognitive psychology and human potential studies. The identity would give him access to academic institutions where he could observe human behavior under controlled conditions. His first stop was Northwestern University, where he had arranged a temporary research position through carefully forged credentials. The university's psychology department was conducting studies on exceptional human performance, exactly the kind of research that would attract subjects displaying unusual abilities. Crickstall had calculated that this would be the most efficient way to investigate the anomalous reports his empire had received. Professor David Walsh met him at the department entrance on Monday morning. Walsh was a thin man in his 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had the slightly distracted air of someone who spent most of his time thinking about complex problems. Dr. Reed, welcome to Northwestern, Walsh said, extending his hand. I've read your papers on cognitive enhancement. Fascinating work, though. I have to admit, some of your theoretical frameworks are quite advanced. Crickstall shook the offered hand, carefully modulating his grip to match human strength parameters. Thank you. Professor Walsh, I'm excited to collaborate with your team. Your research on human potential has attracted attention in academic circles. Across Europe, this was true, though not for the reasons Walsh might assume. The Vorthak Intelligence Network had identified Northwestern as one of several institutions where humans were studying their own species' capabilities. Walsh led him through the department, introducing him to graduate students and research assistants. The facility appeared typical for human educational institutions: cluttered offices, outdated equipment, and the general air of organized chaos that seemed to characterize human scientific endeavors. Nothing suggested the presence of advanced technology or unusual research programs. That changed when they reached the basement laboratories. Walsh used a keycard to access a restricted area that didn't appear on any of the building plans Crickstall had studied. This is where we conduct our more sensitive research, Walsh explained as they walked down a corridor lined with heavily reinforced doors. We've been working with a small group of test subjects who demonstrate exceptional cognitive abilities under stress conditions. The first laboratory contained what appeared to be a standard human testing environment, comfortable chairs, monitoring equipment, and computer terminals. A young woman was sitting in one of the chairs with sensors attached to her temples, her eyes closed in concentration. Her name tag reads Sarah Shen, Research Associate. Sarah is one of our most interesting subjects, Walsh whispered as they observed through a one-way window. Watch this. He pressed a button on an intercom system. Sarah, we're going to start the pattern recognition test. Remember, just relax and let your mind process the information naturally. A complex series of symbols appeared on the screen in front of Sarah. They flashed by rapidly, far too fast for normal human cognition to process. According to Krikstal's understanding of human neurological limitations, no one should be able to identify patterns in data moving at such speeds. Yet Sarah's vital signs remained calm, and after 30 seconds, she opened her eyes. The sequence contains a prime number progression hidden in the geometric shapes, she said matter-of-factly. The pattern repeats every 47 symbols. And there's a secondary mathematical relationship based on ancient Greek mathematical constants. Krikstal felt his internal temperature drop. What Sarah had just accomplished should have been impossible for a human brain. The processing speed required to analyze those patterns exceeded known human capabilities by several orders of magnitude. Either she was using some form of technological enhancement that wasn't visible, or humans possessed cognitive abilities that the Vorthek Empire had completely failed to deck. Walsh beamed with pride. Excellent work, Sarah. How are you feeling? Fine, she replied, though Krikstal noticed she looked slightly fatigued. The patterns were clearer today than last week. I think the meditation exercises are helping. After Sarah left the laboratory, Walsh turned to Krikstal with obvious excitement. We've been working with Sarah for 2 years now. When she first came to us, she was just an undergraduate student having trouble with mathematics. But under the right conditions, she can process information at rates that shouldn't be possible. How did you discover her abilities? Krikstal asked, trying to keep his voice casual despite his growing alarm. Purely by accident, Walsh admitted. She was participating in a routine cognitive study when we had a computer malfunction. The testing program started running at maximum speed, displaying data far faster than we intended. We expected her to give up immediately, but instead she completed the entire test with perfect accuracy. When we investigated, we discovered she had somehow processed information that should have been invisible to human perception. They spent the next hour reviewing Sarah's test results and discussing the theoretical implications. Walsh showed him brain scans revealing unusual activity in regions that normally remain dormant during cognitive tasks. The patterns were unlike anything in standard human neurological literature, suggesting that Sarah's brain was accessing processing capabilities that mainstream science didn't know existed. That evening, Krikstal retreated to his temporary apartment to compile his first report. The implications of what he had witnessed were staggering. If humans possessed hidden cognitive abilities, the Vorthek Empire's assessment of their species was fundamentally flawed. A race capable of enhanced information processing could develop technology and strategies far beyond their apparent limitations. His contemplation was interrupted by a knock at his door. Through the peephole, he saw Sarah Chen standing in the corridor, still wearing her laboratory identification badge. This was unexpected and potentially dangerous. Research subjects shouldn't know where visiting researchers lived, and her presence suggested either a breach of security protocols or something more concerning. Asterisk. Dr. Reed? Sarah called through the door. I know this is unusual, but I need to speak with you about your research. Krikstal opened the door cautiously. Miss Chen, how did you find my address? Sarah stepped inside without invitation, her demeanor completely different from the compliant test subject he had observed earlier. The same way I solved those pattern recognition tests, she said quietly. Dr. Reed, I need to ask you something, and I'd appreciate an honest answer. What are you really studying here? The question caught him off guard. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean. Sarah closed the door behind her and turned to face him directly. Her eyes held an intensity that hadn't been present during the laboratory session. Professor Walsh thinks I'm just an unusually gifted student who happens to have enhanced cognitive abilities. But that's not what this is about, is it? You're not here to study human potential. You're here to assess human capabilities. Crichton felt his disguise systems activate unconsciously, flooding his biosynthetic nervous system with chemicals designed to maintain his human appearance under stress. Miss Chen, I think there may be some confusion. No confusion? Sarah interrupted. I know what I am, Dr. Reed. The question is, do you know what you are? The words hung in the air between them, like a challenge. Crichton realized that his mission had just become infinitely more complicated. Either Sarah Chen was an exceptionally paranoid human, or she had somehow discovered his true nature. Both possibilities suggested that his understanding of this species was dangerously incomplete. I think we should discuss this tomorrow in Professor Walsh's laboratory, he said carefully. Sarah shook her head. Tomorrow might be too late. Dr. Reed, there are people who need to know about your research. Important people who have been watching institutions like Northwestern for a very long time. She paused, studying his face intently. People who have been expecting someone like you to show up eventually. Before Crichton could respond, Sarah was gone, slipping out of his apartment as quietly as she had arrived. He stood alone in his living room, feeling the full weight of his situation settling upon him. After just one day of observation, his mission had taken an unexpected turn. The humans weren't simply displaying unusual abilities. They appeared to be organized, aware, and possibly prepared. He spent the remainder of the night composing his first encrypted report to the Vorthek Council. The message was brief but urgent. Initial observations suggest human capabilities exceed previous assessments. Subjects demonstrate cognitive processing abilities beyond known parameters. Possible evidence of coordinated awareness regarding external observation. Request permission to extend mission duration and expand investigation scope. As dawn broke over Chicago, Crichton realized that his simple reconnaissance mission had become something much more dangerous. The humans weren't just hiding unusual abilities. They were hiding them deliberately, systematically, and with a level of organization that suggested they had been preparing for exactly this kind of investigation. The next morning brought new revelations that would shake his understanding of humanity even further. Asterisk. The hidden nature of humanity. Crichton arrived at Northwestern University the next morning to find a psychology department bustling with unusual activity. Military vehicles were parked outside the building, and personnel in crisp uniforms were stationed at every entrance. His carefully crafted human identity as Dr. Marcus Reed suddenly felt paper thin as he approached the main door. Dr. Reed? A woman in military dress stepped forward as he reached the entrance. Her uniform bore the insignia of a captain, and her bearing suggested extensive combat experience. I'm Captain Elena Rodriguez. Professor Walsh is expecting you in conference room C. The captain's tone was polite but firm, leaving no doubt that this was not a request. Crichton followed her through corridors now patrolled by armed guards, his internal threat assessment systems working overtime to analyze this dramatic change in circumstances. Whatever had happened overnight, it was clear that his presence at the university had triggered some form of predetermined response. Conference. Room C turned out to be a secure facility hidden behind the same keycard-protected area he had visited the previous day. The room was equipped with advanced electronic countermeasures that his enhanced senses could detect but not penetrate. Professor Walsh was waiting inside, along with Sarah Chen and two individuals Crichton didn't recognize. Dr. Reed, please. Have a seat, Walsh said, though his friendly demeanor from the previous day had been replaced by something more serious. I'd like you to meet General Thomas Harper and Dr. Jessica Park. They have some questions about your research. General Harper was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested decades of difficult decisions. Dr. Park appeared to be in her 40s, with the intense focus of someone accustomed to dealing with complex Theoretical problems? Both were studying Krixtel with an attention that made his disguise systems work harder to maintain his human appearance. Dr. Reed, General Harper began, we understand you've been conducting research into human cognitive capabilities. Specifically, you've shown interest in cases where individuals demonstrate abilities that exceed normal parameters. That's correct, Krixtel replied carefully. It's a fascinating area of study, though I'm surprised by the level of security attention it's attracted. Dr. Park leaned forward. Dr. Reed, how familiar are you with the concept of quantum consciousness bridging? The question was clearly a test, but Krixtel wasn't sure of what. Quantum consciousness bridging wasn't a concept that appeared in any human scientific literature he had studied during his preparation. Either it was classified research, or it was something these humans had invented as a trap for him. I'm afraid I am not familiar with that particular theoretical framework. He admitted. Sarah Chen spoke for the first time since he had entered the room. It's the scientific term for what I demonstrated yesterday, Dr. Reed, the ability to process information through quantum entanglement with larger consciousness networks. General Harper nodded grimly. Miss Chen, please show Dr. Reed what we discovered last night. Sarah stood and moved to a wall-mounted display screen. With her back turned to the group, she began drawing complex mathematical equations at impossible speed. Her hand moved across the digital surface faster than normal human reflexes should allow, creating formulas that filled the entire display within seconds. These equations describe the quantum mechanical properties of consciousness under extreme cognitive load, she explained without turning around. They also describe the theoretical limitations of biosynthetic nervous systems attempting to mimic human neural patterns. Krixtel felt every one of his internal alarm systems activate simultaneously. The equations on the screen were indeed describing the exact technology his people used to create human disguises. Information that should have been completely unknown to any Earth-based civilization. How do you know about biosynthetic neuromimicry? He asked, abandoning any pretense of casual academic interest. Dr. Park smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. Because we've been studying your people for over 60 years, Krixtel. The use of his real name hit him like a physical blow. His disguise systems began cycling through emergency protocols, but he realized with growing horror that they were failing. His human appearance was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain under the stress of discovery. Asterisk. You knew, he said, the statement emerging as both an accusation and a realization. You knew I was coming. General Harper nodded. We've been tracking Vorthic intelligence activities since 1962. Your empire has been sending observation teams to Earth for decades, always following the same pattern. Establish a credible human identity, infiltrate academic or research institutions, study human behavior for 6 months, then return home with reports about our primitive capabilities. Sarah turned around and Krixtel saw that her eyes had changed. They now held an intensity that seemed to burn with inner light. The question is, Krixtel, do you want to know what we've really been? Without waiting for his answer, Sarah raised her hand toward the conference table. The solid wood surface began to ripple like water, its molecular structure rearranging itself according to her will. Within seconds, the table had transformed into a perfect scale model of the local solar system, complete with accurate orbital mechanics and real-time planetary positions. Matter manipulation through focused consciousness, Dr. Park explained. Casually, Sarah can restructure atomic bonds by interfacing directly with quantum field fluctuations. It's one of the simpler applications of human enhancement. Krixtel stared at the impossible display before him. According to every known law of physics, what Sarah had just accomplished should be impossible. The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of a small fusion reactor, yet she had shown no signs of strain or external power source. How many humans can do this? He whispered. More than you might think, General Harper replied. Less than you might fear. We estimate that approximately 15% of the human population has some level of enhanced capability. Most never develop their abilities beyond subconscious intuition or exceptional problem-solving skills. Captain Rodriguez had been silent. Until now, but she stepped forward and placed her hands on the miniature solar system Sarah had created. Under her touch, the model began displaying detailed information about each celestial body, including real-time data that should have required satellite networks to collect remote sensing through quantum entanglement, she explained. I can gather information from any location within about 50 light years of Earth. That's how we detected your transport pod. When they entered our solar system 3 days ago, the room fell silent as the implications of her statement settled over everyone present. Krixtal realized that his mission had been compromised from the moment he left Vorthix space. The humans hadn't just been expecting him, they had been tracking him across interstellar distances using capabilities that his empire didn't even know existed. Why haven't you revealed these abilities? He asked. Your species could dominate this entire region of the galaxy. Dr. Park and General Harper exchanged meaningful looks before the general answered. Because we learned early on that displaying superior capabilities tends to make other species nervous. Nervous species make poor neighbors. They start forming alliances, sharing technology, planning preemptive strikes. So you'd been hiding your true nature to avoid galactic conflict? We've been hiding our true nature to avoid unnecessary galactic conflict, Sarah corrected. We've also been preparing for the possibility that conflict might become necessary. The miniature solar system dissolved, and the conference table returned to its original form. Sarah sat back down, looking slightly tired from the demonstration. Krixel, your empire's been evaluating humanity based on our publicly visible technology and behavior. But that's like judging an iceberg by the small portion that floats above water. General Harper activated a wall display showing star charts that covered hundreds of light years of space. Red markers indicated Vorthok territory, while blue markers showed something else entirely. We've been exploring and mapping this region of the galaxy for over a century. Our deep space reconnaissance ships use the same consciousness-based navigation that allows Sarah to manipulate matter and Elena to gather remote information. The display zoomed in to show dozens of blue markers scattered throughout space, many of them positioned near or within Vorthok territory. We have observation posts monitoring 14 different alien civilizations, including your own. We've been watching you watch us for longer than your intelligence services realize. Krixtal felt his worldview crumbling as he absorbed this information. The Vorthik Empire prided itself on being the dominant intelligence-gathering organization in the region of space. The idea that a species they considered primitive had been conducting surveillance operations within Vorthak territory was beyond shocking. What do you want from me? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Dr. Park leaned back in her chair. We want you to complete your mission, Krixtal. We want you to return to your empire with a full report about human capabilities. You want me to tell them about this? About what I've seen here? We want you to tell them exactly what you've experienced, General Harper confirmed. Because the Vorthok Empire is about to make a decision that will determine the future of human Vorthok relations, and that decision should be based on accurate information. Captain Rodriguez pulled up new information on the wall display. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive fleet movements throughout Vorthok territory. Your military is assembling what appears to be the largest invasion force in your empire's history. Intelligence suggests they're planning to eliminate the human problem before we become a threat to galactic stability. Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the university campus where students were going about their normal daily activities. They're making plans based on the assumption that humanity is weak, primitive, and vulnerable. If they proceed with those plans, they're going to discover how wrong they are in the most unpleasant way possible. How wrong are they? Krixtal asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. General Harper's expression grew somber. Dr. Reed Krickstell, what you've seen today represents about 2% of human defensive capabilities. The consciousness-based abilities that Sarah, Elena, and others possess are just the beginning. We've been developing applications of human enhancement for over 60 years, ever since we first detected alien surveillance of our world. The wall display changed to show technical schematics that made Krickstell's advanced alien education struggle to keep up. Ships that could phase in and out of normal space, weapons that could disrupt matter at the quantum level, and defensive systems that operated according to principles his Empire science had never encountered. "We don't want a war with the Vorthak Empire," Dr. Park said quietly. "But if your people bring one to our door, they're going to face capabilities they can't imagine and technology they can't counter." Krickstell realized that his simple reconnaissance mission had uncovered a truth that would terrify his superiors. Humanity wasn't just more advanced than the Vorthak Empire had realized. They were more advanced than most galactic civilizations could comprehend. And they had been hiding this advancement deliberately while quietly preparing for the day when hiding would no longer be possible. "When do I leave?" he asked, knowing that his life had just become much more complicated. "Your transport pod will be functional again in 3 days," Captain Rodriguez replied. "That should give you enough time to compile a comprehensive report. We'll provide you with additional data to support your observations." As the meeting concluded and the others began to leave, Sarah approached Krickstell one final time. "I have one last thing to show you," she said. Leading him to the window, she placed her hand against the glass, and suddenly, Krickstell could see. Beyond the university campus, beyond the city, beyond Earth itself. His consciousness expanded across space, showing him the true scope of human civilization. Hidden bases on distant worlds, exploration ships mapping unknown regions of the galaxy, and research facilities developing technologies that push the boundaries of known science. "This is what we've been building while your empire thought we were primitive," Sarah said, as the vision faded. "This is what they'll face if they choose war over diplomacy." 3 days later, Krickstell's transport pod lifted off from Earth carrying the most important intelligence report in Vorthak history. As he watched the blue planet shrink behind him, he wondered if his empire would have the wisdom to heed his warnings, or if they would dismiss his findings as impossible. Either way, the galaxy was about to change forever. Asterisk.